The anticipation of hearing that cannon go off the first morning was really intense. There was so much buildup. And I think everyone around has a story about what that first day meant to them and what the whole experience meant. But the one that really encapsulates it all for me is Darren's story. He's the guy who had the first vision of bringing an Ironman to St. George.
It was 2007. I just completed Ironman Arizona, and I started to think, why not St. George? Why not my hometown? And I started to think of a plan. Who do I talk to? Where do I go? And that's really when it started to roll in my mind. I got excited, of course, and called Ironman and talked to somebody I thought was a decision maker and proposed my idea, and in essence they said, we're not interested. We don't know where St. George is, and if we did, we're still not interested.
Each year we get dozens of inquiries about communities who want to bring an Ironman and call that Ironman their own.
I just started my job as the Director of Sports Marketing for the St. George Area Tourism Office, and one day into my office walks this Darren Brooks. He's one of the most enthusiastic guys I've ever met, and after about 20 minutes talking to him, I was dreaming about an Ironman.
An idea like this, not one person can pull it off, remotely pull it off. There's so many details, and I knew the community had to get involved. But still, Ironman was just not that interested. In spite of our interest and excitement, they weren't buying it. They weren't buying it.
Darren was so tenacious, and once he looped Kevin Lewis into the conversation, suddenly it became very legitimate.
Finally connected with Steve McFessel, an Ironman executive, and knew that we had a guy that could do it. And he was nice enough, and we tried to paint this spectacular picture, but still, we just couldn't get him that interested.
I got this call from Steve McFessel, and he said, I've been talking to this Darren Brooks guy, and he's piqued my interest about an Ironman in St. George. Are you guys really serious about hosting one? And I said, absolutely, we're serious.
We didn't know that they were in negotiations with Las Vegas, and he just happened to be there working on something that apparently was falling apart, unknown to us. And as that started to unravel a bit, he called almost out of the blue and said, hey, I'm not very far, would it be possible to come up and talk?
We knew this was our chance. So Steve got here and we took him on the tour. We showed him Town Square where the finish line would be. We went up the Gunlock Loop of the bike course. We showed him the Desert Reserve where the run would go. And then we took him out to Sand Hollow State Park and the reservoir out there. When we got out of the car, Steve's face changed. His whole attitude changed. And he looked around and said, this is it. Let's do this.
So an amazing location is only part of the story, and Rock Fry and I were the first boots on the ground here, and we literally lived here. We spent, a couple of months. The first three guys that we were introduced to were Kevin Lewis, who was the head of tourism, and we hired Jeff Gardner as our race director, and then Colby Nielsen was our volunteer director. Just with those three guys, we knew instantly everybody in the community. They knew everybody, and we didn't have to go any farther.
I'm doing my thing.
It's so hard to fathom how much goes on behind the scenes operationally. This course was going through 7 different communities and engaging 12 different government agencies.
So if you've got one volunteer, just somebody to run.
All in all, it took about 2 years to put this thing together. And this all happened right during the Great Recession. So things were really kind of down at that time. But we were going around talking about this dream and this vision. And everywhere we went, people said, let's figure out how to do this.
When I met Colby and interviewed him for the position of volunteer coordinator, I actually tried to convince him almost not to do it. I told him how hard it would be, and his instant response was, okay, let's go. When do we start?
This is a fantastic team effort. We've loved it from day one. The first year we had over 4,000 volunteers.
Stepping.
From registration to wetsuit peelers to finish line, it's basically 2 volunteers for every athlete.
My husband Trevor and I first discovered St. George back in 2010 for the original Ironman and just kind of fell in love with the area. And it's just one of those places with this great vibe. People really love triathlon, and so we just keep coming back.
That first year, of course, I had to be on the starting line, but sometimes life has other ideas.
Darren had been training for the race, of course, but he was also trying to get into medical school.
A few weeks before the race, I got an out-of-the-blue phone call from the medical school in Phoenix saying that I had an interview spot, which I was thrilled with until they told me my interview was supposed to be the night before the race. And I looked at the distance of 420 miles and checked flights and knew I'd have to drive it, but I had to try to make both happen. That was just how it was going to have to be.
At 10 p.m., I get a text from Darren saying he's leaving Phoenix to come for the race. At best, he's going to get here at 4 a.m. That's 6.5 hours of driving. I wasn't sure he was even going to make it.
In the early hours of that first morning, everything was buzzing.
Sand Hollow Reservoir has never seen that much electricity and excitement.
We had 2,500 very keen athletes. We had all our operations staff, water safety, medical, course people, everyone just ready to go.
And suddenly I see this face peering through the tent, and it's Darren Brooks. He looked awful. He had a hoodie on, he was unshaven.
I was not going to miss this. I mean, this was a dream that I'd had, and I had to be on the starting line. I just had to do it.
The morning dawned perfectly. It was clear, it was calm, it was crisp, and the water was quite cold. This was the type of debut you can only dream of.
I didn't see Darren again until he came running up the ramp from the swim. He looked worse than he did before, and there was still a long way to go.
This was only my second full Ironman, and I remember barely making it through the swim, and I did not know if I was going to have enough in me to complete the race.
When he got out into the bike, he got into a rhythm and things started moving pretty good. But once he got to the run course, things started to break down. It wasn't looking good.
I was in trouble on the run, and I decided to take a quick bathroom break and went in and fell asleep. I mean, that's how depleted I was. And thank goodness somebody banged on the door. And I came out and started again and noticed somebody else that was in deep trouble. And we started to talk and started to express our concerns. And right then and there, we made a pact. Like, we're either both going to finish this thing as strangers and friends, or we're not.
And when they get to that finish line, they actually feel like they've come to another home. They've come to another place. They've become another person. That's why the Ironman finish line is so legendary, because it's not just tape on the road or a banner above your head. It's what it changes you into when you finish that race.
Ironman St. George champion! Ironman St. George champion, Hunter Wurtel!
It was amazing to win the inaugural race. And to win on such an incredibly challenging and beautiful course. It was just like a huge high in my career, and something that made me be like, I'm always coming back to St. George after that.
The anticipation on the finish line as you're waiting for your athlete can be gut-wrenching. And as the hours dragged on, I was really starting to worry about Darren.
I was praying to make the deadline, and something during those races happens. It becomes a mental race instead of a physical one. And you have two things speaking to you constantly. One saying, what's wrong with you? Like, this is ridiculous, it hurts unbelievably. And the other one says, you can do it, you know? And I think for anyone that's done something really hard, no matter what it is, mental or emotional or physical or spiritual even, I mean, if you just hang in there, like with me, within several blocks of the finish line, finally, that other dark voice was quiet. And I was able to enjoy that second voice of, like you really did it.
When I spoke to the athletes afterwards, every one of them said, "Oh my gosh, that was so difficult, so challenging, but I loved it so much."
To see that was just overwhelming. I thought, wow, dreams really do come true. It is cool.
Now, in the second year of the event, I walk out the door at 3 in the morning and you can feel it already. It's warm. On one of the toughest courses in the world, you're going to have this added element of heat. You know it's going to be a tough day for the athletes.
It was one of those years where it was smoking hot. It sort of felt like running with a hairdryer in your face.
I managed to get through the bike of that race in 90-degree weather at the time from the beginning of the day, and got so far as mile 22 of the run, as in 4 miles to go. I just passed out and wasn't able to get to the finish line for the first time in my career.
At the end of that day, 18% of the field had DNF'd.
We thought we had a course that epitomized what makes an Ironman great. It was tough. But the difficult course, the heat, and then it's an early season race. We knew the writing was on the wall. The registration numbers just weren't there.
A few months before the third Ironman race, I got a call from Steve McFessel saying Ironman had made a decision to drop the race. It was one of the most painful calls I've ever had in my life. So many years building up to this great event, this great thing for our community, and it was coming crashing down here. It was a call I just couldn't accept.
We knew going into the 2012 event it would be the last full distance race here in St. George, but we held off on that announcement to our athletes and to our population at large because we wanted this day to be about the athletes and celebrate their accomplishments on the day.
We really wanted everything to go perfect for that final race, but in this really kind of symbolic way, Mother Nature had her own story to tell.
Just getting ready for a good day today. The weather's perfect.
St. George 2012 Ironman! Woo! Doesn't get any better than this.
The morning was breathtaking. The sunrise was absolutely spectacular. And when that cannon fired, it looked like a perfect day. 15 minutes into the swim, with 1,800 athletes in the water, Mother Nature unleashed her fury.
Well, look at the dust in the air now.
Oh yeah, it's gonna start getting real bad.
A raging wind exploded, and perfect calm suddenly turned into perfect chaos.
You know, I've never been in a swim like that before that point or after, and it was easily one of the most challenging swims of my life. It was just really chaotic. I mean, I think there was a couple moments where I kind of laughed because it was so ridiculous. Then I alternated between laughing and, of course, like, you know, some fear, of course, because it was quite scary too. Extremely big chop and just, you know, really challenging conditions. And to finally step on solid ground again was a huge relief.
What the hell happened up there, man? That was crazy.
And I remember running through transition and looking back and thinking, oh my goodness, I hope all of the amateurs racing right now are going to get out of here in one piece. But it was very scary at the time.
We prepared for the worst, and this was one of these moments that took our very best.
The wind's up one on us here, but hopefully the athletes will take it to us.
We threw every person in every boat at the situation. We still had 2 more disciplines to go. Athletes were out on that bike course, and the wind just kept howling.
And it just hit me like a wall, and it actually knocked me off the road and down into the ditch. And I was able to ride my bike down the ditch, keep it upright, and ride it back on the road.
My lowest gear averaging 16 miles an hour at my maximum heart rate. Out of control.
I actually remember being on my bike too, and I think I was on there for almost 6 hours, which is an hour longer than normal, and just being blown from one side of the course to the other.
I had to dig to the depths of my soul to get everything out of myself to get that race done and to win that race. You know, it still gives me goosebumps to think about coming down that finish line, slapping the hands, and huge smile on my face. Still probably my proudest moment in sport, winning that race.
1 year earlier, just being taken off the course at mile 22 of the run, going from that to running down the finishing chute in the town of St. George as that Ironman champion 2012 was very rewarding.
The park manager at Sand Hollow State Park told me that the wind never blows from the east out there, but it did on this day, and with it, the epic glory of Ironman St. George was blowing away.
To this date, that 2012 Ironman recorded one of the highest DNF rates amongst Ironman events.
So even though the finish line the last hour and a half was so spread out, sporadic, there wasn't as many as other Ironmans, I didn't care, the crowd didn't care, and for sure, that Ironman finisher didn't care because they were hearing that they were the champion that day.
For me, that phone call telling me that our race was over was unacceptable. We had to come up with a way to make this negative into a positive. I went back to Ironman over and over again with different concepts and ideas. And finally, the idea of, why don't we turn this into a 70.3 came together. At first, there was some resistance to the idea, but the more we talked, the more the idea started to resonate. 70.3 races were on the upswing in Ironman, and perhaps together we could turn this St. George race into one of the signature races on the 70.3 circuit.
So what happened next was we announced this race as the Ironman 70.3 US Pro Championship, and then the magic started to happen.
The epic challenge of the 70.3 distance seemed to call the best of the best here, and they came out in droves to experience it.
Everybody wanted to come here. Olympic medalists, Ironman champions, champions from other Ironmans in Europe and Australia. They all wanted to come to St. George. So when you get 90 to 100 professionals, the first year of a 70.3, that's unheard of.
I think St. George is really a badge of honor for anybody who toes the line here.
It's just so grand and so big, and just like, I don't know, I just feel at one, I feel at peace here. I mean, the people are fantastic. I just love everything about it here.
The community here and just the whole camaraderie that the whole town has, it's really special.
It's one thing for one person to have a dream, but it's entirely another thing for an entire community to embrace something like this.
1907, let's go, brother, let's go. Nice, y'all, nice, let's get it.
Ironman has become woven into the fabric of our community. It's who we are, it's what we represent, and I just can't thank the people enough.